Your book pricked my guilty conscience. Hosting and bandwidth provided by the Blue Box Group. Check them out at bluebox.net. You're fantastic at coding, but do you have an action plan to take it to the next level? The upcoming book, Next Level Freelance, will help you optimize your freelance business for happiness. The book is packed with actionable steps to make more money, case studies, tips to find more clients, and exercises for you to establish your desired lifestyle. Extras include 9 interviews with freelancers who make great money while enjoying great work-life balance, videos on strategies to find quality subcontractors, and videos on making more free time by outsourcing your daily tasks. Check it out today, nextlevelfreelance.com. This episode is sponsored by PlanScope. PlanScope is a project management and collaboration app built for freelancers and the way they work with clients. It makes it easy to price out new estimates, and once you're underway, help answer the question, will this get done on time and under budget? I've been using PlanScope to do my estimates and manage my projects, and I really, really like it. It makes it really easy to keep things in order and understand when things will get done. You can go check it out at planscope.io. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 86 of the Freelancers Show. This week on our panel we have Reuven Lerner.
Hello there.
Curtis McHale.
Good day.
Eric Davis.
Hey.
Jeff Schoolcraft.
What's up?
I'm Charles Max Wood from DevChat.tv. We have a special guest, and that's Joe Kutner.
Hi.
Joe, since you haven't been on the show before, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a freelance Ruby programmer, and I'm also an author. I'm pretty active in the JRuby community, and I maintain some JRuby open source projects. And I do contracting on Ruby projects.
Nice. So you wrote this book called The Healthy Programmer, and it's kind of interesting. It fits well with this show because we talk a lot about lifestyle, but how do programming and health intersect?
Yeah, it may seem like a strange way to scope the topic of health to programmers. I mean, and certainly not all programmers are unhealthy, and we're not the only folks who are concerned about our health. But there are aspects of our job that I think have an impact on how we take care of our body. For example, programming requires a lot of concentration, and as a result of that, we sometimes lose track of other important things like our health, how we're eating, and how often we're getting physical activity. So in the book, I try to address some really simple things you can do to overcome those problems.
Yeah, I really liked it. What was it that prompted you to write the book?
Well, it's a topic that's interested me for a long time. Just general health, aside from programming. I've always been very athletic and just interested in those kinds of things. But when I got my first job out of college, I immediately noticed changes in my body. I was putting on weight. I just didn't feel as energetic as I had a year before. And so I made it sort of a hobby of digging into these topics. And at some point I decided that I had enough material, enough research that I was aware of and things like that to turn it into a book. But I would say actually the real catalyst was when I started seeing research and seeing more and more people talk about the impact that physical activity has on your mind and your ability to think and ultimately be smarter, because that's really important to us as programmers.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. When I was working for a company here in Salt Lake City, one of my coworkers frequently would, when he noticed that he was, feeling a little bit run down, or I looked like I was kind of losing focus, he would recommend that we go for a walk. And that's something that you recommend in your book, and it was always something that, just 10 minutes, we'd, go walk around the parking lot and come back. Mm-hmm. And it made a huge difference in our ability to kind of finish out the day strong and get stuff done.
Yeah, I find that if I'm up against a tough problem or, trying to debug some tough code or something like that, and I'm really stuck, one of the best ways to get unstuck is just to go for a walk. There's no doubt about the effects it has on your brain, actually causing your brain to create proteins that help you remember things better and solve problems better. But actually, it has a big impact on your health too. And I think for a long time, I wouldn't go for walks, or I wouldn't go out and get 5 minutes of, brisk walking or walking stairs or something, because I figured it was a waste of time. But the fact is, those small little spurts of activity throughout the day, 5 minutes every hour, can actually be more important to your health than, for example, a 30-minute trip to the gym. So it's these really small things that.
No, I was just saying in our back channel that I love to walk, and I walk from my clients' offices, from the train station to the client's office and back. And so I see that as, wow, this is wonderful. I get some walking in. But if I'm working at home for the day, sometimes I'll say, well, I've got a few minutes. And I really never thought about even going outside for a walk for 5 or 10 minutes, because I thought of it as a waste of time. And you're basically saying, no, this is really good for you, and this is a good habit too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh. It's interesting that you mentioned working from home, because, when I've worked in office environments, I actually find that it's quite a bit easier to get more step count, to get a little bit more walking. I'm the guy that recommends that instead of having the meeting, sitting down in a meeting room, we go outside and I'll walk around and on a trail or something. But at home, boy, I find that if I'm tracking my step count, it's absurdly low. The most walking I do, if I don't try, is shuffling between my office and the bathroom around the corner. And so I have to really be conscious about it, working from remote environments.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I mean, I've had a Fitbit for a long time, and I put it on, this last week or so. And if I make it out for a walk or make it down to the gym, I'll get 8, 9, 10,000 steps in a day. But if I don't, it's usually like 2,500 steps, which is really, really low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that, step count, again, it seems like a simple thing to track, and it seems almost like a trivial thing to track. But, it really turns out that it's important. There's a high correlation between people who take more steps and their health and even their lifespan. A number of studies have shown that people who work in jobs that require them to be more physically active, good examples are restaurant servers, nurses, farmers, that they tend to live longer.
Yeah, and I definitely see that. I'm also diabetic, and I've read a few studies that actually show that the more active you are has more of an effect on your overall health, on your blood sugar levels and everything else than your medication does. And that if you're highly active for 30 minutes, it's actually, it's equivalent, I think, to 2 doses of your medication is I think what they figured out, minus all the side effects. Like you don't run the risks of like overdosing on your drugs kind of thing with your exercise, but you get all the positive benefits that you would get from the medicine that you're taking. And so it's highly effective that way. It just makes a big difference.
Yeah, there's some real good science there looking at people and medications and walking. One study that I often reference was done in Japan a few years ago on a group of about 250 adults who were doing no physical activity or no formal exercise prior to the study. And they were enrolled in a 5-month walking program where they just simply supplemented their day with a little bit of walking, some brisk, some moderate. And at the end of the study, they found that the participants who had done the walking had significant increase in their aerobic capacity, thigh muscle strength. It had significant drops in blood pressure, and ultimately reduced their risks of lifestyle-related diseases like diabetes, heart disease.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, just the difference that makes. I've also heard that diet makes more of a difference than exercise. Have you seen that or seen?
Well, yeah. So it depends what your goals are. Now, before talking about diet, I always say there's 3 things that you should never talk to people about, and it's politics, religion, and diet. And yeah, diet's a tough thing to talk about, and I think it's because we're all kind of experts. I mean, we've pretty much been eating almost our whole life, so we know a thing or two about, what works for us and what doesn't work for us. And so there isn't really a one-size-fits-all diet, and I think there's some real movement in that direction. There was a recent commentary in JAMA, the Journal of American something, and it was called an end of the diet debates. And the idea is that we need to stop focusing on the sort of the macronutrient composition of our diets, because most studies are showing that the difference between whether it's Atkins or Mediterranean diet or whatever, that these differences are marginal, and that there's a much bigger impact on simply the number of calories we eat, our lifestyle interventions, and even the psychological issues that go along with it. Because, that's another reason that it's difficult to talk about diet is, for a lot of people, it's a psychological issue. And I think it's important to consider that. So, back to your original point, if your goal is to lose weight, then yeah, it's pretty clear that your diet is the largest factor. I see a lot of people who are trying to lose weight, and so they'll start running, something like that. And if you look at the calories that you burn when you go for a run, like a 20-minute run, it might be a few hundred calories over what you would have otherwise burned, which is the equivalent of about a muffin. So you could either not eat that muffin or go for a 20-minute run. It's your choice. Now, exercise has a lot of different health impacts, not just your weight. But if your goal is taking off some pounds, it's definitely diet is one area you need to be focused on.
Yeah, I found with diet, and you may not know this, but I do a ton of cycling, which I've talked about on the show previously. But my biggest challenge with diet is when I'm going from 300 to 400 kilometers a week down to a couple hundred because of life, or we're in a relaxing week, and keeping up the diet to where it was when I was exercising, puts on a couple pounds pretty easy in a week. And it's eating the same stuff, same healthy things, same everything. It's just not tracking it and not realizing how much I'm burning versus how much I'm actually consuming. Yeah,
in endurance sports and endurance exercise, I know I'm a big cyclist too, actually. And it's amazing the effect it has on your appetite. As soon as I start a training regime or whatever, I get hungry well beyond the amount of calories that I'm burning. And when I start pulling back, I often keep eating at the same level. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be tough to deal with.
When I was in high school, my swim coach, I did swimming in high school, he actually warned us all. He's like, you see this? And he kind of points to himself. He's like, this is what happens when you quit swimming and keep eating like you're swimming.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of he was trying to give us that life lesson, Don't do what I did.
Yeah, but Joe, what you said about exercising calories. So, I have an app on my phone for keeping track of how many steps I'm taking per day. And I sometimes go on a treadmill, and every so often I'll calculate how many calories I've burned. And it is sort of shockingly low compared to how many calories you consume in food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, does it take into account your basal metabolic rate, Reuven?
I don't know. I'm going to plead ignorance on this one.
So
what is the basal? Yeah. Let me put that more bluntly. I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I've been kind of interested in this stuff for a while, mainly because I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes about 7 years ago. But anyway, your basal metabolic rate is basically the amount of energy it would take to keep you alive if you didn't do anything, or you were basically sedentary all day long. And so, your body burns a certain amount of energy just to keep you alive. And then the rest of your calorie burn on top of that is, okay, I walked around, or I went and worked out, or, I went down the stairs or whatever, picked up the remote and changed the channel.
That makes sense. No, the app on my phone just asked me how much I weigh, and the treadmill didn't even do that. So I'm guessing the treadmill is going to be less accurate, but I'd never really thought about it in terms of how much I need this basal metabolic rate. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah, it also talks about it in the book. I saw the formulas in there. I don't remember exactly where, but
yeah, and there's a companion app to my book for iPhone, and there's a little calculator in there that you plug in a few metrics, and it'll give you your BMR, your BMI, and some other things.
That was one thing.
Now, what do you think about BMI though? Because as a cyclist for many years, I have monster quads, and I'm 5'8.5", and like 180 pounds is kind of on the heavy side in the winter, but I'm always like way over my BMI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I tend to be too, because I'm just a little bit broader. I'm fairly lean, but I think BMI, it's gotten a pretty bad rap lately, because it's very one-dimensional. Well, I guess technically it's two-dimensional, but there's many more dimensions to your health, right? So I think when considering something like BMI, just like when you consider your weight, you have to balance that with other factors. So in and of itself, yeah, there are studies that correlate it with things like heart disease and type 2 diabetes. But in each particular case, you need to factor in other things about you and your body type and everything else.
Yeah, I've always said when asked by friends that the BMI relates more to a sedentary person than someone who's, I guess, an athlete or someone who's been doing it for a while, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
Yeah, but
it really comes down to
making a broad generalization here, right? This is a broad generalization there.
Yeah, I mean, it's still height to weight or weight to height. I don't remember which one, but it's not a perfect measure. And I think most people who get out and, exercise regularly and are eating right and, feel really good most of the time. I mean, I think they know that they're healthy or generally healthy. Whereas, the people who are really concerned about their BMI are the people who are obese or morbidly obese or, just don't pay attention to it until somebody comes up and says, this number's really off.
Yeah, I like to compare it to if you were monitoring a production server and you only looked at CPU usage. You wouldn't really have a complete picture of how your application is running and the health of that application. And that doesn't mean CPU isn't important. CPU usage isn't important, but you really have to consider the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a great analogy.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the, what do we call them, fads, I guess? I want to get your opinion on some of these. So one of them, and you talk a lot about it in the book in chapter 3, is the standing desk.
Mm.
And so, basically you bring up the point that sitting is probably killing you, and then you also bring up the point that standing may not be the best option for you either, depending on what your health situation is. So I'm kind of curious, how strongly do you recommend that people get a standing desk? And, if they're not really cut out for standing, because they have one of some of these health issues that make it somewhat dangerous to do, what do you recommend to those people?
Right. So I do usually recommend that folks at least try a standing desk. And like you said, it's not necessarily right for everybody, but it turns out that best position to work from is whatever position you're not currently in. So changing positions is really the goal. And really, the purpose of using a standing desk isn't so much to get you to stand. Standing in itself, the amount of extra calories you burn are pretty small. I think it's something like 50 an hour at most. And then you create other risks, like standing puts a large strain on your circulatory system, so it increases your risk of developing blood clots or varicose veins and things like that. The real purpose for standing is that it makes you more likely to move around or walk around or change position. So actually studies done with students in classrooms have shown that the students who work from a standing desk are just more likely to step away, go for a walk, and get that little bit of physical activity that we already talked about is very important. So it's important to, look at your own personal situation. And I think that's true with any health recommendation. There are very few things that I or any other health expert can say unequivocally everybody should do. For example, some people like treadmill desks, walking desks, and studies have shown by and large that those are good for you. They increase your caloric expenditure. They're just great for your health. But those same studies have shown that they actually reduce your productivity by about 15%. And that's due to a decrease in dexterity while you're walking. Now, most of those studies were done on people doing true typing activities, which, for programmers, if all you're doing is typing, then you're probably creating more problems than you're solving. But again, it's about finding what works for you. I find that a treadmill desk doesn't work for me. I find it distracting, and I'd rather just get on a treadmill when I'm ready to take a break.
Yeah, and see, I actually use a treadmill desk. I'm just standing right now, but I found that when I'm not on a treadmill, like right now I'm standing, so I'm actually dancing around and, bouncing from thing to thing. Like I'm extremely distracted. But then when I'm sitting, the afternoon slump, I kind of doze off. But if I'm on the treadmill desk in the afternoon, like I'm focused, I work until my wife gets home. Like it's the perfect environment for me at that time. But like you said, it took experimentation and trying different things to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think just as with any software process, you've got to try new things, experiment, and iterate. You know, I've tried standing all day, and I found that just didn't work. It made my legs very tired and didn't really probably give me that much of a benefit. So, yeah, I also like getting on the treadmill in the afternoon. I find that works, and learned it through experimentation.
Nice.
No, we actually got a treadmill for my office, I guess about 6 months ago, maybe a little less. And then I went away for the summer, so I really haven't had a chance to use it as much as I would have liked. But the idea was to experiment with it. And so far, I haven't really experimented. I've just sort of walked on it maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time. But I really hadn't thought about using it in the afternoon. I sort of thought of it more as a sort of like a morning wake-up thing. But I'm going to have to try that, actually. It sounds like a really smart idea.
Yep. So one thing that I thought was interesting about the book as I read it was that you seem to put things into context that programmers understand. So, I mean, you talked about sort of unit testing your fitness. And so you talked about, here are some, unit tests that you can answer sort of thing. There was, I'm trying to remember all of the different instances that I saw.
Yeah, the biggest one was the Agile Diet.
Yeah.
I caught a lot of flack for that analogy from people who didn't read the chapter. But I think it's a fair comparison or a fair analogy. And a lot of this stuff, unit testing, thinking about your health in 2-week increments and doing a daily stand-up like you would in Scrum. Those kinds of things, yeah, we do them in software because they work. But not just with my health, I find that those are just a great way to make change in your own life, positive change. And I think those kinds of like Kaizen type approaches are universal.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting way of doing things, and I was going to make the joke that I'm an agile dieter because I'll eat Twinkies or Ho-Hos, but
yeah, I think the key there is like I said, experimentation, but it's also about the reason I call it an agile diet is that much like in software, the worst thing you can do is stick to a plan when that plan isn't working. And I think a lot of folks do that with their diet. They'll find something that's fashionable, that sounds appealing, and it as you start out, it's great. You're happy with it. And then after some time, you become disinterested with it, or you find that you're not continuing to lose weight if that's your goal. And that's why it's important to take those things in chunks. And I recommend try a diet for 2 weeks. And if it's not working, try a different diet. Or if you're tired of it, or if it's not making you happy, then iterate. Because that's important. If your diet doesn't make you happy, if what you eat day to day is not enjoyable, then your diet's not going to be successful. And everybody has different tastes. So it's important to try different strategies and find what works for you.
And that's what's important. It's like any kind of real scientifically based diet, you're going to find that if you stop, like if you stick with it for 6 months and then stop it, like you go back to where you were or worse. So you have to, like I use the term diet all the time, and people say, oh, you're on a diet. And I say, well, no, I'm using diet as the collection of food that I eat as an organism, like the biological term. Mm-hmm. And so I look at that as that. And it's my diet is basically something that I kind of add stuff to, subtract stuff to, but it's something that haven't really changed heavily in 4 or 5 years now, because I found what worked for me, and I stuck with it. And if I feel like I need to make it one little change, I'll do it scientifically, like, swap this in, see if I feel better, whether it's weight, more energy, any kind of factor that I'm looking at. But the important thing is to stick with it and not not jump from fad to fad, and not do something that's so unreasonable that I'm not going to be able to sustain it for more than a year.
Yeah, I've heard several times from people basically saying that the best diet for you to be on is the one you're going to stick with. And I think that's really the case. If it's effective, in other words, you feel healthier, you are healthier, and, you can stick with it, then it's a good diet for you. I have another question, and that's related to ergonomics. I mean, one of the things that you put in here was basically unit testing your vision. And so you talk about eye strain and headaches and things like that. And, kind of appropriate since yesterday I was out with a headache. But, Can you just summarize some of the advice you have for folks on that?
Yeah, there's a few things that I think are common mistakes. One is sitting with your face too close to the screen, and one is sitting too far. Your monitor should be about 20 to 40 inches from your face. So a good way to test that is to stick your arm out in front of you, and if you can touch your monitor, your arm is about 20 inches long. So if you can touch your monitor, then you might consider moving further away. Another problem is not looking away. So there's this great rule called the 20-20-20 rule. And the idea is every 20 minutes, you look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. And that should be enough to help reduce eye strain. And actually, eye strain is one of the things that sort of often induces headaches. And also that 20-20-20 rule fits in really nicely with the Pomodoro technique and taking Pomodoro breaks. So that works really well for me.
One thing that I found that contributes to my headaches is whether or not I've had a lot of caffeine. I come back off of the caffeine high. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I'll wind up with a headache from that.
Yeah, caffeine's interesting because an initial dose of caffeine will often help relieve a headache. But the studies or the research that I've read suggests that you can get what's called a rebound headache, where after that initial discomfort goes away, you end up with another headache. So that's why I often avoid drugs like Excedrin, where they include acetaminophen with caffeine, and the purpose of the caffeine is to get the acetaminophen into your bloodstream and more quickly affect the headache. But I think you have to be careful when using caffeine to help with that kind of problem. Mm-hmm. That's not to say coffee or caffeine is inherently bad. There's plenty of research to suggest that it's actually good. Just have to use it accordingly.
Yep. So what about things like neck position and like your posture?
Yeah. Well, I think posture when you're sitting down is tough, and there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. In fact, as part of the research for the book, I talked to musicians who study how to hold your body, how to position your body, and how to control and move your body. Because, pianists have had the issues that we've had for many hundreds of years before us. We didn't invent carpal tunnel syndrome. They've learned how to deal with it. In fact, at schools like Juilliard or the Royal College of Music in London, young pianists actually take posture and movement as part of the curriculum. So wow. One of the researchers that I talked to, one of the experts that I talked to, he instructs pianists, singers, and even computer users how to hold their body. And one of the things he told me was that your posture, everybody's posture, is unique, and that's because of the subtle differences in our proportions, the length of our arm to our torso, and all of that. And so finding the right posture or position for you, just like everything else we've talked about, requires experimentation and iteration. And he actually recommends observing yourself using mirrors or even video cameras so that you can watch yourself as you work and see, is it your shoulders that start to hunch or your back that starts to slouch, and learning how to correct that. Now, the bottom line, though, is no matter how good your posture is, if you're sitting for very long periods of time, or even if you're standing for some of that time, you're going to probably start to slouch or have pain in certain areas. And most of the time, that's the result of simply of weak muscles, because when we're holding a position, we need our muscles to support our spine and prevent it from flexing too much, because it's that flexation that leads to what we just often describe as back pain. So the best thing you can do for your posture or for that kind of back and neck pain is just a few simple exercises that are designed to improve the stability of your core muscles and your supporting muscles. And I talk about that a good bit in the book. They're not, the exercises that I recommend are based on simply what some of the leading researchers recommend. And they're not what you might expect. They're not crunches, that's for sure. They're exercises that emphasize stability without flexing your spine, because that's what's important to us as desk jockeys, is stability. A mixed martial artist might need dynamic movement or the ability to rapidly twist their spine, but we don't need that.
And my brother-in-law is a physical therapist, and just about every time he came to visit our house, he would look at me working and say, "Oh my God, you're totally sitting the wrong way. You're not doing the right thing. You're going to get this. You're going to get that." And I see it every day, and it made me feel really bad. I suppose now make me feel good. But I think one of the major things that I did this summer, which really helped, was I got a detachable keyboard. I usually use my my laptop as my main computer, and so I had to sit close to the computer, close to the desk, in order to be able to use it. And by getting a separate keyboard that plugged in, I find that now I can sit in a way that is even acceptable to my brother-in-law, and quite frankly, makes me feel better as well.
Yeah, I struggle with when I'm working from my laptop. And actually, that's, I think, a point that's really relevant to this discussion about freelancing is, the best part about being a freelancer is that I can go work from wherever I want to. But sometimes that means I don't have a good workspace. My favorite coffee shop has nowhere that I can stand up. I do have one coffee shop that has sort of a counter that I work from that's standing height. But yeah, if I'm sitting in an uncomfortable chair and I'm on my laptop and I'm hunched over, I very quickly develop discomfort. But I'm the kind of person, I'll work from a hotel lobby. And just a couple weeks ago, I went up to the front desk of the hotel and I was like, "Can I just work from here?" So I'm standing at the counter where everybody probably wondering what was wrong with me, but working from my improvised standing desk.
Yep. So what's kind of the most important point out of the book?
I think the most important point is that in order to be the best programmer you can be and to continue being a programmer for a very long time, you need to increase your physical activity in just small amounts and just, simple things as we've discussed. But, I think as programmers, we're very often trying to improve our productivity, so we have a million blogs and discussions on how to set your vimrc file or something like that. But the best way to improve your productivity is by taking care of yourself, both in your health and for your mind.
Yeah, when I was reading the book and the initial, I think it was the preface actually, it really struck home to me, and it was all stuff that I had heard before and that I knew, that you need to be healthy, you need to take care of yourself, that you'll get more done, that it helps your brain, it helps your body, you feel better, you're able to put more hours in if you need to, you're able to, be flexible if you need to, you can, all of these different things, and, it really just made me feel a little bit guilty, I have to say. About not doing them, because I know that I need to, and I know that ultimately, say if I go to the gym for a half hour or an hour, it's time that I will earn back. And so, I just need to make it priority. And, so I highly recommend to people now that they, go read this book if you're a programmer. I mean, he speaks our language to us about our health, and, it's a terrific book, and it really does just break things down and go, hey, look, here's how you think about this the same way you think about the other things that you do. Were there other areas of the book that you guys wanted to talk about? Different things that jumped out at you?
There's a couple areas that I try to remember, because I read The Healthy Programmer a while ago, like in the first few betas, and then I've been reading some other books around exercise and the brain connection. And so there's quite a bit about how exercise actually helps your brain, and how, from an evolutionary perspective, why that works like that. And actually, this book was the first kind of inkling I saw of that, and it kind of led me into another book called Spark, and then a couple other places. But that's something, it's pretty interesting how just by moving around, that makes you think better, and actually like the chemical reactions and, the mechanics of how that works, instead of just, go out and run and you'll be better.
Yeah, you talk about from the evolutionary perspective, there's some really interesting emerging hypotheses on that. For example, one hypothesis is that our brains evolved to be superior, not because of our diet or because we ate a lot of fish, as was previously thought, but maybe that because of the way we hunt prey. It's that movement may actually be, from an evolutionary perspective, responsible for the size of our brain and our intelligence. And that's the reason for that is based very much in science. There are as I said earlier, there are proteins that are secreted in our brain when we exercise that improve the connections between neurons. It actually promotes the growth of new neurons and protects them from damage and stress. I think, and I guess also on the topic of evolutionary biology is something I talk about in the book is vitamin D synthesis. And I think it's another area where we've really gone away negatively from what our bodies need. So we're spending the vast majority of our life indoors with little exposure to sunlight, which of course means that we're not synthesizing vitamin D. And as a result, the majority of the population, in most cases, has a vitamin D deficiency.
Is that true regardless of where you live? Like, I can imagine in the Northeast where it's kind of cold, but I mean, I live in Israel where it's pretty sunny a lot of the year.
It's even true in it is true in most places. It's even true in Australia. There was a study done in 2005 on Australian office workers, and more than 50% of the office workers had a vitamin D deficiency. And if you know anything about Australia, actually, I lived there as a kid, and I remember not being allowed to go play outside without a hat on because the sun is such a big concern. But certainly people with darker skin, folks of Hispanic origin that live at higher latitudes, really are probably the most in danger of this. And, we can increase our vitamin D levels, it appears, somewhat through dietary intake. But more and more, there's science suggesting that is just not a good substitute for synthesizing vitamin D the way Mother Nature evolved us to do so well over millions of years.
So we should just get out and get more sun on a regular basis.
Yeah, and for people with fair skin, it can be as simple as 10 minutes of sunlight exposure on large areas of skin per day to get the necessary vitamin D. As much as 6 times longer for folks with much darker skin. But again, it's important to don't take what I'm saying the wrong way. Don't go burn yourself in the sun, because obviously that's not good for in terms of skin cancer and whatnot. But we do probably need more sunlight.
Yep. You go outside, you do the Wall-E thing. You open up your panels and recharge. So let's talk a little bit about the app for a minute. Did you write the iPhone app, or did somebody else write it for you? Yeah,
I did. I've got a little bit of experience doing iOS programming, and I thought initially I wanted to do a website, but I thought that a mobile application would be a little bit more useful tool.
Yeah, it's something that you have with you. One thing that I thought was interesting is that you have all the goals in here from the book, and so you can just mark it off, buy a pedometer. I already have one, and so I can mark that off. Check your resting heart rate. So you do that and you mark it off. And then you've got the log where you can add things to your log, which is kind of nice. And this checklist, the daily checklist, which is really kind of nice for me because I can sit down and just say, okay, I did this and, check, done.
Yeah, so that checklist is something that I build up in the book. As you read through the book, I explain why each of those 5 items exists. And in summary, their plan, have effectively a daily stand-up like you would in a scrum or something. Walk, so get 20 minutes of walking a day, even if you split it up and spread it throughout the day. Another one is eat 5 servings of fruit and vegetables. And while I said it's difficult to have general rules that work for everybody about eating, I do like that rule in part because it's inclusive instead of, excluding things that saying you can't eat this and you can't eat that. Here's some things that you should eat and can eat. Try to aim for that. The third one is move. So use a standing desk, change positions often, just maybe several times an hour, change positions. And then the last one is build strength, using some of the exercises I talked about to increase the stability of your core muscles. The app also has a built-in Pomodoro timer for Pomodoro workouts, which is sort of an idea I've promoted in which you use the Pomodoro technique, which is working for about 20 to 30 minutes, taking a 5-minute break, and then repeating. But during that 5-minute break, mixing in some walking, some simple physical activity. And that timer integrates with the log, so it automatically records it for you. So you can go back and look at the progress you've made. I think keeping a logbook, however you do it, is important for your health, because changes to our body and changes to our health take a really long time to become visible, and they take much longer, years, to become permanent. So recognizing those kinds of changes, whether they're positive or negative, is difficult. And that's why I think it's important to keep track of the progress you've made and what you've done.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and the Pomodoro workouts and stuff are all at the end of the book. One of the last chapters, he talks about that and the approach, and it's kind of a cool deal. Of course, sometimes I use my Pomodoro breaks when I'm doing Pomodoros to like go use the bathroom and other necessities. So,
well, studies have found that a break as simple as getting up and going to the bathroom can actually be good for your health. If it means that you're not sitting for 2, 3, even 4 hours without getting any movement, then yeah, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, and you address this in the book, but just how evil is sitting?
It's if it was a James Bond villain, it would be Spectre #1. It would be the worst.
Yeah, I have this $900 death trap that I bought that I sit in every day. Yeah, I have the Aaron Herman Miller chair. Does that help at all, having, a really nice chair, or does it really not matter?
Supposedly, and there is some interesting research, it helps people deal with pain. Honestly, my primary chair is a drafting stool that I keep next to my standing desk so I can switch back and forth. And I'm not on that stool more than 20 minutes at a time, usually. So I'm not on there long enough to notice any discomfort. But in terms of the studies that show certain kinds of chairs relieving discomfort, similar results have been found with studies on Swiss balls, fitness balls, which increase the activation of those core muscles. So by balancing a little bit on that ball, you might be doing things that help prevent discomfort. So I think a good chair is great, and I think it's important, but I think it's more important that you have a lot of options, that you have a Swiss ball you can sit on, a regular chair you can work on, a standing desk, which will allow you just to keep moving and keep active.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I went and I got one of those IKEA standing desk deals that they talk about on Lifehacker.
Mm-hmm.
It was the $22 desk, and I spent $30 on mine because the prices have gone up on some of the parts, but it went together pretty easily, and it's kind of nice just to be able to stand and work. But I find that I don't move all that much. I'm just standing there. So I have two questions related to that, and the first one is what should I be doing while I'm standing there? Should I actually be trying to move, or?
Yeah, you should be dancing.
All right. I'll put on some.
It's true.
I'll put on some.
The dancing
New
dance.
podcast of dance moves while you're coding, right?
Yeah, do the head bob. And the other question I have is, how do you keep track of how often you need to switch from standing to sitting? Because you said every 20 minutes, but I mean, I get sucked into what I'm working on, and I'll look up and 3 hours have gone by. So how do I prompt myself to get out of the chair or to get back into the chair?
So to your first question, what do you do? I've experimented with a lot of different things, including balance boards. There's one that I really like, I think it's called a Spooner, but it's like this $50 toy, basically, that's for kids that want to pretend like they're doing cool skateboard tricks. And it's like a bowl, and you kind of stand on the edges and it wobbles. And that act of balancing, I find, uses or, keeps me from getting little discomfort points. But there's also, there's no real evidence of this, but some people have suggested that balancing in that way actually improves your creativity because it's forcing you to use both sides of your brain. And while that's not necessarily been proven, we do know that therapists will use balance boards for patients that have suffered from a stroke as part of their rehabilitation. So it's definitely doing something for our minds.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I recently read an article on, I don't know because it's so new, I don't know if there's any science behind this, is doing yoga positions from your standing desk. And that's sort of something I've been playing around with, just different forms and different positions. But yeah, no matter what you're doing, if you're standing for an extremely long period of time, it's going to become tiresome and probably uncomfortable. And the way I solve that is I have a timer on my desk. and I set that timer for my Pomodoro workouts, whether I'm doing it formally or informally. And while it's easy to become absorbed in our work and that feels productive, I find almost every time that the best path to productivity is to interrupt myself. So I step away, come back, reset, and refreshed. And I often have new ideas, and I get stuck less often.
Yeah, and I guess if you're following Pomodoro, then when you break for your Pomodoro break, then you can just come back and sit if you were standing or stand if you were sitting.
Yep, that's exactly what I do.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Joe. It's been fun to talk about.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I feel smarter about this stuff. So, and the book explains it in a way to where it's not 10 million ideas. It's just simple things, and it's really nice that way. So, anyway, let's do the picks. Curtis, do you want to start us off with the picks?
Sure. As we're talking fitness, I'll pick my app that I use for kind of food tracking and weight tracking more often when I'm getting into the cycling season, and not as much now, but it's called MyFitnessPal. It's great because you can actually scan the food you're eating, and it will, put all your calories right in there and show you exactly what you're using, and it supports Canadian stuff, and most other ones do not. You can scan the barcode on the food, Eric, who's asking questions in chat, and it'll put everything right in there for the serving size, and you can measure it, and it's great. I got a little scale that actually goes with it for like $10 to weigh the yogurt you're eating, and you can tell exactly how many calories you eat. And I was very surprised the first time about how healthy I ate, but how much I actually ate. It was like triple my calories that I really needed.
Yep.
I talk to people about different tools and apps and stuff, and I cannot tell you how many people recommend that app. And I've used it myself, and I find it to be excellent.
Yeah, I've used it too. I really like it. Eric, what are your picks?
All right, so my pick, it's actually two, but it's a two-part blog post. It's by 80Biz. It's called How to Double Your Revenue and Profit, Really. It's a pretty good one because it kind of gets into like optimizing different parts of your business, and, it goes over it and kind of does it in detail where it's not a big dramatic change. Like you have to like unveil a new product or hire 30 new employees, but it's more of an incremental approach. And this is kind of what I've been doing a little bit, past few months, and following a different process, but at the exact same steps. So it's interesting if you're interested in kind of getting some incremental gains and kind of doing a little bit better, over the next few months.
Nice. Reuven, what are your picks?
All right, so I've got 4 picks for today, 2 sort of on topic and 2 less so. First one is, I'm also going to mention the app that I use on my phone called Acupedo, which is a pedometer app. And I have an Android phone. Apparently they have an iPhone iOS version as well. And I've had it on there for a while. And it's just nice to be able to keep track of how many steps I'm taking each day, how far I've gone. Has cute little graphs as well. The second thing is I'm a big fan of The New Yorker. I've been subscribing, I guess, for about a year and a half now and reading it before then. So just as a general pick, I think The New Yorker is a great, great, fun thing to read. Interesting articles, super well written. And I guess, it was in May of this year that they had an article by Susan Orlean about treadmill desks. And I remember reading it, and the first part of it I said, this has got to be the craziest thing I've ever heard of. And fortunately, she explains in the article not only how treadmill desks are actually useful and good, but that you're not walking at full speed while on them, which was a point that I had somehow missed. So I had these images of people walking very, very quickly and trying to type at the same time and trying to figure out how that could possibly work. And basically, in the wake of that article, I got the treadmill, and I've yet to arrange it into a desk, but it gave me a lot of inspiration, a lot of very interesting fitness information about how that can work. And then the two other picks that I have, just as a screencast series called the Emacs Rocks, which I hadn't picked before, which is kind of fun. The guy's perhaps a little over dramatic and excited about Emacs, even more excited than I am. But he's got some good demonstrations, good screencast there. And the last pick is I finally, it came out a week or so ago as of this podcast, Mavericks, the new version of the Mac OS. And so far, everything has actually worked super, super smoothly. I cannot say that I see huge differences, so it's worth the zero money that they charged. But everything seems stable, apps working, everything I have with Homebrew is working. So the fact that things have not gone kaput is actually a positive thing in my eyes. So anyway, that's it for me for this week.
Awesome. Jeff, what are your picks?
So there's a Stir Kinetic Desk, and I've not used it, but in the vein of the show, and as Joe mentioned a couple of times, that the healthiest position is the one you're not in. And so if you're not as religious with Pomodoro and being able to switch your setup regularly, stir, and I think there's another one that you can program and it will move for you. So given some period of time, and it will raise or lower and switch your position, and you adjust. And so I don't know, it's interesting. And the other is an Emacs. This article, I forget the guy's name, but it's Emacs as my leader, and it's just I don't know, throw fire on the holy war. But this is a Vim guy that went to Emacs and is using evil mode, which I had never heard about. And it is interesting. I don't think I'll use Emacs, but I mean, every once in a while it's nice to see how the other side lives. But I just thought it was an interesting read. But those are my 2 picks.
Awesome. So I've got a couple of picks. The first one is that Lifehacker standing desk. Like I said, it's pretty inexpensive, and other than the fact that it takes up a bunch of space on my desk, I'm really liking it, and I'm planning on using it off and on today. I got it put together yesterday, and then the tension headache that I was trying to ignore that morning just got to the point where I couldn't actually do anything other than lay in bed and wish I could die. So I haven't had a chance to use it yet, but I'm pretty excited. Another pick that I have that's related to fitness is the Jillian Michaels Show. It's a podcast, and I really, really enjoy it. Her producer is also on the show, and she's kind of an interesting character. But Jillian talks a lot about lifestyle and about fitness, and she has people call in and ask her questions. And anyway, it's really, really awesome. And for those of you who don't know who she is, she's one of the trainers on The Biggest Loser television show. And then I'm going to double down on the MyFitnessPal pick, because it really is an awesome app, and I really like it. So +1 there. And we'll let Joe do some picks.
Yeah, I've got 2. The first one is a piece of software called Flux. I think it's pronounced that way. It's F.Lux. And I think it's been mentioned on the show before, but they've recently had a new version released. And it's an application that runs in the background and adjusts the color temperature of your screen with the time of day. So as it gets later in the day, it makes it warmer and reduces essentially the blue colors. And I've found that that's been really helpful in getting myself to fall asleep, because studies have shown that blue light signals to your brain that it's daytime. And so staring at a blue-colored screen can actually mess with your sleep patterns. So Flux, it's available for Windows, Linux, and Mac, and even for jailbroken iPhones. The second pick is a talk by Jeremy Walker at Barcelona Ruby conference this year called Refactoring Your Productivity. It's a soft talk. It's fun, and he's got a lot of great tips for being a more productive programmer, including going for a walk.
Awesome. All right, well, I'll have to go check out that talk. I always love recommended conference talks. All right, well, let's go ahead and wrap up the show then. Thanks for coming, Joe. Really appreciate you and your expertise in this area.
It was a pleasure.
If anyone has any questions for you, what's the best way for them to reach you? Do you have a blog or something they can comment on, or would you rather just have them email you or tweet you, or what?
Yeah, sure. I'm Codefinger on Twitter, and you can reach me by email. I'm Joe at Logichaus, LOGICHAUS.com. And there's a website for the book, healthyprog.com, and you can find out more about it and get in touch with me that way.
All right. Well, thanks again. And like I said, we'll wrap up the show. We'll catch y'all next week.